Welcome, everyone. I think we'll have a few more people join us throughout the evening, but we'll go ahead and get started because we want to make sure we have time to hear our three incredible speakers tonight. I just want to start by introducing myself. My name is Carly Coons. I am a licensed social worker and the Director of Education and Programming at the Blue Dove Foundation. The Blue Dove Foundation, we are an organization that is focused on education, awareness, and outreach around mental illness and addiction in the Jewish community. And we are committed to transforming the way that the Jewish community understands and responds to mental illness and addictions. And one of the ways that we do this is through this platform, Quieting the Silence. This is one of our cornerstone programs where our goal is to eliminate stigma and quiet the silence around mental illness and addiction and encourage people to seek and offer help when they need it. And this is an opportunity for individuals to share their lived experience and for the community to receive these stories. So tonight's event is really focused around suicide. It is an open conversation about suicide. September is Suicide Prevention Month, which is an opportunity to raise awareness around suicide and suicide prevention, with the ultimate goal being eliminating stigma around talking about suicide so that we can be the best supports to those who are struggling and to those who have lost people. Tonight, you will hear our speakers share their experience with their loved ones who have struggled with suicidal ideation and some who have lost their loved ones to suicide. So I want to remind and invite everyone to take care of yourself as you're with us tonight and as we're talking about these challenging topics. To give us a little context in Judaism and in the time of year that we're in right now, we are in the midst of the Jewish high holiday season, having just celebrated Rosh Hashanah over the weekend and with Yom Kippur right around the corner. And recognizing the complex nature of human life is an intrinsic part of the high holiday season. On Erev Yom Kippur, many people follow the custom of lighting a memorial candle, known within the Jewish tradition as a yahrzeit candle, for loved ones who have passed away. In fact, fire is an incredible metaphor for human life. In the book of Proverbs, it is written that the human spirit is the lamp of God that sheds light on one's innermost being. And just like human beings, fire grows and it fades, it burns and it's extinguished. And when we light that candle, we remember the people we've lost. But when it comes to mental illness and addiction, we often find that the way that the candle was extinguished overshadows the light that that candle produced while it was burning. So we want to have this opportunity to properly honor lives that we've lost to suicide and mental illness or addiction at this time of year, and to help destigmatize these issues within our community, because it helps normalize that individuals battling these challenges are not wrong, that they are human beings experiencing challenges like so many of us. And suicide is so prevalent in our community at large, not just the Jewish community, but nationwide and worldwide. Suicide rates have increased by approximately 36% between 2000 and 2021. And in 2021 alone, over 48,000 people died by suicide. And it's the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 14 and 20 to 34. So we know that this is impacting so many people. And while we might not know somebody personally who is struggling with suicidal ideation, who has died from suicide, it's very likely that somebody in our community is struggling and we may just not know it. And that's why at the Blue Dove Foundation, we think that there's no substitute for opportunities like this, where we can have education, where we can hear personal stories and think about what it is that we can do to support ourselves and others in our community. At the end of the evening, we'll put some links in the chat so you can check out our resources, see the incredible ways that our speakers have engaged with the Blue Dove Foundation. And we invite you to use those and share those. And now I want to turn it over to my teammate, Jamie Glazerman. Jamie will be helping introduce our speakers tonight. So Jamie, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Carly. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight and to have the opportunity and the privilege really to welcome our all three of our speakers. We're grateful that they're here sharing their moving stories with us. I will introduce each speaker before they talk. Carly is going to put a link in the chat that has a little bit more information about each speaker tonight. Our first speaker tonight is Ruby Falk. Ruby Falk is a compassionate couples therapist dedicated to helping couples navigate the challenges of grief together. After experiencing the shocking loss of her dad, she pursued a master's degree in counseling with a focus on marriage and family therapy from the University of Colorado, Denver. Ruby brings a robust understanding of family systems to her therapy practice, as well as a deep sense of empathy for the human experience. Go ahead, Ruby, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and have the opportunity to speak candidly and honestly about my loss. I think when I was reflecting on what I wanted to talk about, there were sort of two avenues that I was thinking about. And one of them was how much I empathize with people who are uncomfortable talking about suicide, because it is uncomfortable. It is an unnatural way to die. And I get it. I get it. And then the other side of me wants to say, like, okay, yes, and it's time for us to put that aside and really talk about what's happening in this country. And this timing is very significant. I get from the organization Everytown, and I got a text today about gun access and the link to suicidal deaths and gun access. And it said, respond with your state where you live. I live in Colorado, and we will give you the statistics of the gun deaths and the suicide gun deaths in your state. And I texted back Colorado. This was like an hour ago. I texted back Colorado, and I got a text back that said 73% of gun deaths in Colorado are by firearm suicide. And that Colorado has the 10th highest rate of gun suicide deaths in the US. The work that I've done around suicide and understanding and talking about it, that statistic didn't really surprise me. And yet I read it and was just kind of floored. So I can take a step back here and tell a little bit more about my story. I lost my dad in 2015, 2 months after my wedding. My dad had struggled with suicide, with suicide ideation and depression and anxiety throughout his entire life. I was aware of it, but I guess never really understood the extent or thought it would be possible. And my new husband at the time and I were living in Baltimore on the East Coast, and I was unable to move on. Not that you ever really move on, but I was unable to process my grief so far away from my family. They were all in Denver. And I basically said to him, we got to go, or I am going to Colorado. It would be cool if you came with me, but no pressure. And he came with me because we had freshly gotten married. And I don't think I was truly ready for what was to come. I think my understanding of suicide, I never struggled with blaming myself at all. But I remember then going to suicide support groups and thinking, struggling with the language of suicide prevention. And I get where it's coming from a societal, a bigger picture, how do we prevent suicide from happening? What can we do to support our community members? But I remember really internalizing that when I was sort of fresher in my grief of I tried all the things. I was involved in his life. I called all the time. I was so supportive. I was loving, like all of these things. I really didn't understand how it was like my responsibility. I'm jumping ahead a little bit because Carly sent some pointers, and it was what support I wish I had. And that was one thing that really stuck out for me. My line of work was political nonprofits and fundraising. And all of that just came to a screeching halt after I lost my dad. I was unable to articulate to my husband what this experience was like for me because it's not articulatable. And I started bringing him to therapy with me because I knew that he would hear me talk there, that my therapist would kind of like synthesize and repeat what I was saying, but in a more cohesive way. And it really changed things for us and really changed things for both him and me, and giving him the space and empathy to understand what he was going through as my partner. And that is what sort of shifted this like major career change for me. I was 6 months pregnant with our first daughter. And I was like, I want to go to grad school, and I want to be a couples therapist, and I want to work with couples who are grieving. And that's what I started doing. And it's just been a journey, like a never ending journey for me. When I think about what I wish people knew about suicide and the way that it affects individuals and families of those who died by suicide, what I opened with was like this, that I now have this empathy and understanding for how jarring it is for someone to hear that. Like the last time I remember, friends of mine traveled to Colorado for the funeral, and the last time they had traveled to Colorado was exactly 2 months before, and it was for my wedding. And everyone was just in this state of complete and utter shock. And that was, yeah, I think I wish that people understood the lifelong like level of confusion that people who are survivors of suicide have. And I say this because a few years ago, I lost my mother-in-law, who I was very close to cancer. And I remember sort of re-experiencing all of these feelings of like, I had gotten to this very good place of, this was not a choice my dad made. My dad was sick, he was suffering, he was ill. And then watching my mother-in-law go through her battle that was horrific, and like these invasive thoughts coming back of, now you're going through this again and you didn't have to. Everything your dad did was a choice. Everything that your dad has put you through already didn't have to happen. So now you're going through this twice, and it should have only been once, or ideally not at all. I think it's like these, we know that grief isn't linear. We hear these sort of like, cliche phrases, but like the whiplash of that, of like how well I thought that I had done sort of as an individual and a therapist, processing these feelings of, this was not a choice. This wasn't something that was done to you. And how quickly that came back after watching someone die of natural causes. And I find that like, I am still guilty of using phrases and terminology like that, where I like give more, not legitimacy, but like, I don't know, I'm like apology to someone who dies of cancer or something else. That in the article that I think Carly shared, I call it like an unsavory death, because people are really reduced to the way that they died when they died in an unsavory way, such as suicide or overdose. All the happy memories you have of them kind of go away and take a really long time to come back. And I wish that people were more curious to know about my dad, when they were asking about him immediately after he passed, I wish they were more curious to know like these good memories about my dad and our relationship, rather than how he died, who found him, did I know, how did I intervene, like all these questions, which are, weird, but I can empathize and understand where they're coming from. Thinking about some support that I had and or wish that I had, I think from like again, sort of this societal perspective of people just really don't know what to say when anyone dies, let alone when it's something related to a mental health crisis or addiction. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They're worried so deeply about saying the wrong thing that they just simply won't say anything, which I get. But also I wish it was different. And I also wish on like a professional level, I've worked for Jewish organizations in Baltimore, and I think people were just, there is this push to, I don't know, like a more spiritual understanding of like, people would send me things like, God has a plan, everything happens for a reason. And I just was deeply put off by that. So yeah. And then thinking about what gives me hope. So I end on some positive way, thinking about what gives me hope. I have 2 daughters who are just wonderful people. And this idea sort of, Lador Vador, and life goes on, which was really hard for me to accept, and still is in a way, because the fact that my dad isn't a part of their lives is, I think, a pain I will never get over. But internalizing this idea that life goes on really hit home for me when I had our first daughter. And I'm very committed to openly talking about my dad. My oldest daughter is 5, so in an age appropriate way and time, openly talking about him and how he died and the life he lived and our relationship. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Ruby. That was really insightful, and I really appreciate how direct and open you were able to be with us. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Rabbi David Seth Kirshner has served as the Rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in New Jersey since 2007. He's a natural leader, a charismatic speaker, and a magnetic personality. Rabbi Kirshner embodies the best in Jewish people and is an important figure in shaping the conservative Jewish world. Prior to joining Temple Emmanuel, Rabbi Kirshner worked at the Jewish Theological Seminary and also served as rabbi for the Hebrew congregation of Fitzgerald, Georgia, traveling every 3 weeks to this community in South Georgia. Rabbi Kirshner holds a BA degree from New York University in Toronto and earned an MA in Hebrew Letters and Rabbinic Ordination from the Jewish Theological Seminary. Rabbi Kirshner is married to Dory Fruman Kirshner. They have 2 children. Go ahead whenever you're ready, Rabbi Kirshner.
Thank you, Jamie. You all can hear me. Just a nod would be helpful. Great. So I just want to begin tonight by thanking the Blue Dove Foundation. They're doing really holy and amazing work, and a special shout out to Justin, to Carly, to Jamie. They're building bridges in ways that a generation ago no one could have thought possible. So thank you for your holy work. Thank you for touching lives and for all the things that you do. It's an honor for me to be with you again tonight. And I also just want to pause and thank Ruby for your courage and for sharing your story. It was really was touching and resonating. On July 17th, 1996, my oldest brother, Gabriel, who was a rabbi, who was married with a 2-year-old girl, committed suicide. He died by suicide. In those days, we said committed suicide. Today, we say died by suicide. It was an absolute shock and reverberation to our family. I've always likened it to walking down the street in Manhattan, where I used to live at the time, and someone just goes on their fire escape and pours out boiling water and it hits you. And you're both shocked by the fact that you're hit by this water. And then you realize quickly that it's very hot, and then it burns you, and then it creates these very painful welts and blisters. And that was the process of his death, because it wasn't just a death. It was a traumatic death. The circumstances were traumatic. He was very young, in the prime of his life, beginning his career, and it really caught us all off guard. What's been interesting to me in the 27 years since he died is I was overcome, as were my parents, with and my brothers, with tremendous regret. Regret was this overarching theme in our relationship since Gabe's death. And interestingly, since that time, I have mourned the death of my father and most recently my mother. My father died in 2011 and my mother died just a year ago. October 12th will be 1 year. And the notion of regret is just as heavy for both of them. And I think regret is more intrinsically connected to the notion of death than it is to death by suicide. So that is just one thing for us to keep in mind. The second thing is I too struggled for a long time with this idea of someone who could die by suicide and the choice that it had in their hand. And I have spent a lot of time and a lot of hours in therapy and wrestling with this idea. And I liken my brother Gabriel's death by suicide to that of a family member's death by heart attack and another family's member death by cancer. That this is no different of an illness. It just looks different because cancer you can see on an MRI. A heart attack you can see through a catheterization, but you can't see someone's mental unwellness. But they are the same. And in fact, it can be much more silent of an ailment, and people can mask it for much longer. Judaism, which is the world in which I work in, has long been an advocate for people's mental wellness. In fact, the prayer that is recited anytime that we take out the Torah, which traditionally is on Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, specifically mentions in the Hebrew words, refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, that when we're making a prayer on behalf of someone's well-being, we're not only praying that they get better, that their broken leg is healed, or that, they withstand the chemo or they go into full remission, but we also say refuat hanefesh, which means that their soul be healed, that their emotions be healed, that they be strong, because you are indeed, dealing with two sides of this challenge to a person, and not every ailment is one that can be physically seen or fixed in a way that a cast could provide to a broken leg. Similar to that, there is a teaching that we learn in the book of Leviticus when someone is afflicted with the disease of leprosy. In those days, they didn't have doctors. And the high priest served in the role of doctor. And the high priest, it was always in those days a he, would look at the ailment and then go back and look again. And the rabbis asked this question, why do you have to look twice? What do you have to look at someone's leprosy twice for? What's the purpose of that? And if you went to a doctor today, most times I bring my kids when they were little, they put a swab in their throat and say, okay, you have strep, or, look in their ears and say, you got an infection. They didn't look twice. They didn't get a second opinion. They just knew. And we know too, right? When I, play basketball and fall hard, and then I go to the doctor and they put it under x-ray. Yep, you broke your ankle, you broke your finger. You don't need these other thoughts, but the text specifically tells us that the high priest came back and looked twice. And the answer that is given for this reason is very potent and beautiful, and I think it's a message to all of us. The answer is that first you look at the affliction, and second you look at the person. And that if you can't see the person who's dealing with the affliction, then you've missed the whole purpose of who it is that is in pain and what suffering is. And I think so often, for too long in the world, we looked at an affliction and not the person. And when I first started to advocate for people who were struggling with mental health, I had said in my congregation that if someone were afflicted with breast cancer, it would take minutes for a food train to be organized so that meals would be handled for the next 2 months. There would be someone to keep company of the person who was getting chemotherapy. There would be carpools organized so that kids wouldn't miss soccer practice and people could go to all the events that they wanted to. And all of those gaps that would otherwise happen are filled. And even some of the loving tenderness that's needed would happen as well. But if someone is suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder or from schizophrenia or from massive depression, there was a whisper, a pall around that, and we didn't know how to deal with it. The good news is, and there is good news, that from 1996 till 2023, we have come an incredibly long way in a relatively short time. The Jewish world has come a long way. The general world has come a long way. That's the really good news. Here's the opportunity for us. We still have a long way to go. We have a long way to go in making our voices a little bit more loud and more full-throated when talking about people who are challenged with mental wellness issues. We are capable and able to do more work in making sure that people who suffer from mental illness and anyone who is the subject, sadly, of death by suicide is considered to have died by a disease that is no different than someone who dies by cancer, heart attack, or stroke. We also have a lot of room to work on legislation to make sure that physical therapy, emotional therapies, physical therapists, and insurances are covered in a more blanketed way by universal health care. One of the major challenges that a lot of people are feeling these days is that sadly, they can go to the doctor when they break their arm, they can go to the doctor when they have a cold or they have a heart attack, but their therapists are not covered by insurance the same way. Some of that responsibility falls on therapy and some of that responsibility falls on healthcare, and legislatively, we can help with that. There are things that we can do. And most importantly, what we can do is just start to break the stigma that lives around mental wellness. We have broken a lot of that stigma in the last 30 years, but there's more to break and there's ways that we can grow. And I really look forward to partnering with Blue Dove and any and every person, resource group, and organization that extends their hands so that we can do that holy work together. And I want most of the people, everyone here to know, most importantly, I want the people here to know that they're not alone, that everyone is dealing with something, everyone is struggling with something, and it doesn't make you broken, it doesn't make you weird, it doesn't make you strange, it makes you human, it makes you normal, and that you have many people who love you, who support you, and are here for you whenever and wherever you need to reach out.
Kirshner, that was incredible. I want to go ahead and introduce our last speaker, who is also a colleague of mine at the Blue Dove Foundation. Mel Berwin is a lifelong Jewish learner and educator. She serves as the Director of Congregational Learning at Congregation Neve Shalom in Portland, Oregon. She leads workshops and writes resources for the Blue Dove Foundation, bringing together her passion for Jewish education and conversations around mental health. She's a mom to 3 young adults. In her free time, you can find her communing with herons in Oregon's beautiful wetlands. Go ahead, Mel.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you so much, Ruby and Rabbi Kirshner. It was it's an honor to be on this panel with you, and I'm so sorry for your losses. I, as Jamie said, have 3 kids. They're all late teens and early adults, and all of them have struggled with mental health. I'm here both as an educator, I think, and as a parent. I can't really separate those exactly. But I am a single parent. I have just been on this journey with all of my kids as they've really struggled over the last several years. And I'm primarily here to talk about my daughter, with her permission, who attempted suicide when she was in 8th grade. And I also, in my role as a Jewish educator, have supported families who have lost family members and friends to death by suicide. 2 of my kids have lost friends to suicide. And so I just really feel very called to kind of bring the work that I do in the Jewish community together with being really a vocal part of the conversation around mental health, whether that's through speaking like this or writing, or just the conversations that I have in my congregation and community. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about my daughter. Her name is Nava, and she was a pretty typical kid growing up. She's my middle kid. And when she was starting her 6th grade year, in the fall of her 6th grade year, she was diagnosed with a chronic illness, which she really didn't have the skills to cope with. She was starting middle school. She wanted to make friends and kind of fit in. And all of a sudden she was just in extreme pain a lot. She had extreme fatigue. She was in and out of the hospital. She had a new diet that she had to follow, and she really didn't feel like she could fit in, and she really didn't know how to cope with these new things that she was dealing with. And over the next couple of years, she went through kind of all of the things that you hope your kid doesn't go through in middle school. She had a terrible eating disorder, really severe. She started to self-harm, and she was diagnosed with severe depression as well as anxiety. And we did have a therapist on board and tried to find all of the right resources, but we really just watched her spiral and didn't know how to help, or nothing that we tried seemed to help. And I think her experience of that severe depression was really just this apathy, this kind of void. She didn't really believe anything could help. And she didn't really, when she was at her most depressed, she just almost had no emotion at all. She stopped crying. She didn't laugh. Like, she left all of the activities that she had been part of. All of her friends changed. The people that she spent time with were other kids that were struggling as well, and they didn't really have skills to cope either. And in the fall of her 8th grade year, she attempted suicide for the first time. She took a bottle of aspirin that she had found in her locker mate's backpack. And I took her to the hospital. She went from there to a subacute treatment center. So she was in residential care for several months, where they were working with her. She attempted suicide a couple more times during her stay. And she also escaped once from a secure facility, but that's a different story. And then when she returned home, we got her into a program for DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. And it was a family program. I attended with her on some days, and then she and I attended separately on certain days. My older son, who was also struggling at the time in high school, he started DBT as well. So it became kind of a language, a vocabulary that we could use as a family. And we found it really, really helpful. It just felt like life skills to me, the skills of emotional regulation, distress tolerance, communication skills, mindfulness. They felt like skills that we should all be learning as kids. And I certainly didn't learn those things, but it felt like really helpful also to just have those as, like I said, kind of as a vocabulary for our family. And I was so drawn to these different skills and this language of DBT that I started adapting them to use in the congregational school that I work with. I started training my teachers in these skills, non-judgmental descriptions and dialectical thinking, and some of the ways that we kind of work with kids. I also felt like I was seeing so many more kids in our school over the years that were struggling with anxiety in one form or another. And I was teaching some workshops on working with kids with anxiety. And then I was bringing in Jewish texts also that I felt like really related to some of the skills that we were learning in DBT. And that's how I actually connected with Blue Dove Foundation, was through leading some of those workshops. So I wish I could tell you that my daughter was fine now. She has had a really hard road. She's 19 years old, and every fall, it seems like she experiences a new medical challenge or receives a new diagnosis. I'm not sure what it is about the fall, but there's always something. Along with her chronic illness and that really debilitating fatigue that she experienced for years, she's also had seizure disorder for several years now that comes and goes. She just spent a week and a half in the hospital with seizures, and she's now in a PT inpatient treatment facility. And 2 years ago, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which actually helped us understand a little bit about why all of the regular antidepressants that she had tried hadn't really worked for her. But, you know, she has a few different diagnoses that are really life-threatening for her. And it's just been a long road. And she did graduate from high school, which was not obvious that she was going to be able to do, but it was a really big deal. She has a boyfriend, she's taking classes at the university, she has a job at the zoo that she loves. She has lots of pets that keep her company and give her comfort. And she's really just still learning to live with all of these difficult challenges in her life. And she has had periods of time over the years where she continues to experience such severe depression or anxiety that she continues to have ideation, suicidal ideation or thoughts. She hasn't self-harmed in several years, but she's learned to talk about and manage the depression that she has, and to know when she's in harm's way. And, you know, after she graduated from high school when she was 18, she decided she needed to check herself into a hospital because she really didn't trust that she was safe at home. So I guess I have a few different thoughts or reflections on the experience of parenting a kid who experiences mental illness, who experiences severe depression, who experiences psychosis that is dangerous to her and to her life sometimes. One is that I you know, at least in my experience, it's not a short-term thing. It's not a one-time thing. It's not, hasn't been something that, you know, you kind of fix. I think as a parent, you just kind of want your kid to feel better, and you're looking for solutions. And I used to feel, you know, when she was kind of at the beginning of all of this, like I just needed a crystal ball. I wanted to know that in 5 years she was going to be alive and okay. And you know, I think it makes sense to have that wish. I think it would have been hard for me to find out that she was still going to be struggling 5 years down the road. But honestly, she's made huge strides, and we've learned so much. And even if it sometimes feels like it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, I'm just incredibly grateful that she's alive and that, you know, we're together. And so that's kind of the next thing, which is the importance of just keeping connection with our kids, right? No matter whether it's suicidal ideation that they're struggling with or other forms of mental health challenges. But I appreciate dialectical behavior therapy's kind of idea of do what works, right? Like, and I think that one of the things that works and one of the things that's important is to just maintain connection and maintain communication, whether that's, you know, there were times where I was so emotional over what was happening with her, I didn't feel like I could speak to her, so I wrote her letters. And there were times that she didn't feel like she could say what she needed to say to me, and her form of communication was through art. And so, you know, those were some of the different modes that we used to try to stay connected. Another thing is just how isolating it is. It's isolating. It was isolating for her to feel so far from where she had been. She had been a straight A student, and all of a sudden she was failing. She had been involved in a bunch of different activities, and all of a sudden she really couldn't do those things, or kind of not really all of a sudden, but one by one, she dropped all of those activities. I think that it's one of the reasons why it's so important to me to be honest about what's going on in our family, is just because there's a lot of other people out there, like Rabbi Kirshner said, who are struggling, right? And I think it can be hard to see that, right, in the age of Facebook and a lot of shiny looking families. And if we aren't open and honest about what's happening and find our supports and find our community of other people who are struggling, I think it can feel even more isolating and more stigmatized. It's been important to me to be open in my community, partly because of the role that I play too, that other families know that they can come and they can tell me what's happening, you know, with their kids or their partner, or they have worries, or their, you know, child is going to an inpatient therapeutic space, or something is happening. And I'm glad that I can be there for other people. And I need to know that there's other people who, you know, are experiencing some of what we've experienced as well. And I think just one other thing is that, I don't know, when Nava has been in crisis at various times, really well-meaning people, you know, will say, what do you need? Or what are you doing to take care of yourself? And I have a lot of feelings about those kinds of self-care questions. I know that they're coming from a really positive place. And I think that, you know, I mean, when she was in her, you know, when she was suicidal, when she was in residential treatment, you know, the question, what do you need? I just kind of wanted to say, I need my kid to live, right? And when they asked me what I was doing to take care of myself, my answer was not drinking myself into a hole. I just needed, you know, to acknowledge that we just standing, right? Just going to work, showing up in the places that I needed to show up, taking care of my other kids, even when she was really struggling. That question around self-care can feel like an additional burden at a really hard time. And I think that, you know, when we have kids or family members who are really struggling, we do learn a lot about ourselves. We learn what we need. We learn how to show up. We learn how to take care of ourselves. And I think it's really important. We kind of find the therapies that work, you know, for the person that we care for, but also for ourselves. We recognize just how exhausting it all is, right? Hope is exhausting. Researching is exhausting. Trying to figure out the next best thing is exhausting. And in DBT, there's this idea that we have, you know, kind of 5 options all the time, whatever, you know, the struggle is, and that we can do nothing, that we can make things worse, that we can radically accept the situation, that we can solve the problem, and we can change our perspective. But I think, you know, what I've learned from all of these years supporting my kids is that the first step is always radical acceptance, and it sometimes takes me a little while to get there. And when we're not radically accepting the situation, which doesn't necessarily mean condoning it, it doesn't mean we're happy about it, but it just means like really understanding where our kid is and what's happening for them, and that they're doing the best that they can, even if it looks maybe like they're not, or that they aren't able to help themselves more. That radical acceptance is kind of the first step, and it helps us to stay open and to be empathetic and to kind of try to see things from their side, so that we can figure out what it is that they need, because that's also a hard question for them. Those are a couple of the thoughts I wanted to share.
Thank you so very much, Mel. That was an incredible story. I really appreciate you being so open.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jamie, for introducing our speakers along the way. And a huge thank you, as Jamie said throughout the evening, to each of our speakers for sharing, sitting here as a participant, receiving these stories from you was very emotional. And so I really appreciate your openness and your vulnerability to share so that we can continue this conversation and support people in their journeys. Some themes that I heard throughout that I think are really going to stick with me. The importance of being surrounded by and sharing with community wherever you are on your journey. And whether you are the person sharing or you are or struggling, or you are the person supporting somebody who is struggling, finding that community for yourself and sharing open and honestly where you are, so that people can support you, but also so that they know what's going on, and they can themselves see, their stories reflected in that. And Rabbi Kirshner, your words of that, we are not alone in this. You're not broken. You're not wrong. So powerful. And I think that goes with any and all mental health challenges. We are never broken. We are never wrong. We are B'Tselem Elohim. We are created in the image of God in the way that we were meant to be. So we really appreciate those words. I want to thank all of you for attending, for being here with us tonight, whether you're on the Zoom or watching this on Facebook. We really appreciate you creating this space to hear these stories. And I also want to say a huge thank you to the Blue Dove Foundation team, without whom this event would not have happened. So thank you to Max and Sherry and Jamie and Justin, for helping us put this together so that it could happen tonight. And throughout the evening, we mentioned a few times that we have some resources to share. So I want to put those in the chat. The first I want to mention is our resource called Every Life Counts, created by Mel. We have 4 parts to this that will be coming out. It is a suicide prevention and education program. And so our first 2 sections of it are live, and we will continue to add those to the website as they are created. And there's incredible readings and articles and resources in there to help you thinking about how you can support others or how you yourself can get support if you need support. And this will continue to expand and grow. Here's the link to the article that Ruby has written and shared with us, her story, remembering the good. A daughter reflects on her father's life. It is a very meaningful and powerful read. And Rabbi Kirshner has shared his story with us in our Quieting the Silence book. It's a really beautiful book. So I'll put the link in there if you're interested in purchasing a copy of the book. And I'd be remiss in the high holiday season not to share our high holiday resources. So these are our high holiday resources that have incredible activity-based learning that you can engage in yourself or with your community, or with your family. And we invite you to use and share those in whatever way you would like. And to wrap us up, we will end with a closing prayer. One of our really powerful workshops that we do is a Misha Berach workshop where we explore values and we think about the Misha Berach as a prayer. Why do we say it? Where do we say it? When do we say it? And then individuals have the opportunity to write Misha Berach prayers in small groups together. It's a really powerful workshop. Should definitely check it out if you're interested in bringing it to your community. And this particular Misha Berach prayer that I'm going to share with you was written at the Association for Reformed Jewish Educators Conference this past January, written by a group of educators. So it's a really powerful Misha Berach that I'm honored to get to share here. So let me share my screen. Can I get a thumbs up if someone could say perfect? So we'll read this prayer, a Misha Berach for suicidal ideation. Out of the depths I call to you. Help me to see that I am not alone. Though I am in the dark now, remember that by nature, things are always changing. Help me to see that there are those around me who are willing to help, and help me share my burden with those who love me. My life is important and I am important. The world is a better plan with me in it. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, who lifts up the fallen. Amen. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We so appreciate your time. We hope you have a beautiful rest of your high holiday season. Shana Tova, everyone.